Welcome back to the Get Loved Up podcast, your number one resource for inspiration and motivation to live your purpose, make healthy living a priority, and thrive doing what you love. I'm your host, Koya Webb, a small town girl who chased her dreams and caught them, a former track and field athlete who healed using spirituality and yoga, and an entrepreneur who didn't let sexual assault, racism, and insecurities dim her light. And now it's your turn to allow these episodes with some of the top voices in spirituality, wellness, and entrepreneurship to inspire you to thrive. Let's get loved up together. Malaika is a New York Times bestselling author, advocate, and educator who is inspired to bring people together through celebration of difference. Motivated by her mother's work advocating for women's and children's rights around the world, Anna uses an intersectional lens to advocate for women of color and educate others. Her focus is on addressing gender and race issues in the U.S., especially the pervasive erasure of Black women, when she explored her recent release of The Three Mothers, how the mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin shaped a nation. Anna!
Hello!
Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so excited about this interview. You've done so much work, and I'm so grateful for the work you've done. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Yeah, I just took a nap with my 6-month-old, which is always very restful, better than any kind of caffeine.
Right?
That's great.
That's so amazing. I love that you said a nap, because most people don't believe in naps. It's just like caffeine through and things like that. But, in the Get Loved Up community, we really champion, I call it a horizontal pause or a nap, but do you regularly take naps? And how hard is that, being a mother of 2 now that I just found out previously since the book, but you have a son and a daughter. How do you figure that out? Use time to take a nap?
Even when I was kind of younger, I'm thinking even undergrad, everyone always made fun of me because I would take these power naps. I'd like come back from class and take a quick 15-20 minute nap, go back out to my next class. And everyone else was like, why don't you just drink coffee? I've never really drank coffee. Nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't the thing that gave me the most energy. I really think just resting, closing your eyes for a bit, going into your little dream world for a second is so critical. And when I had my son, it was actually easier to remind myself that I needed to nap, because everyone says this whole sleep when the baby sleeps. And I felt like even more of an acceptance of me wanting to nap. And then though, when my daughter was born recently, about 6 months ago, I realized my kids nap on different schedules, that it's going to be so complicated. So I don't get to nap as much as I would like. But when both kids are sleeping, it is immediately in my mind, no matter what else I think I have to do, I lay down, I fall asleep, and I nap with them. So it's very helpful. I sometimes find it easier to sleep during the day than at night. I think so many fears and stresses can come up at the end of the day. And it's been keeping me awake lately. So a nap to catch up is really kind of important.
I love that. That's a great tip for all the moms out there. If you can do it, sleep when they're sleeping. I don't think I've heard that often, but I'm also not in the mom world yet. But I just think that's such a good tip, because a lot of people are like, when they're sleeping, get a million things done. I definitely heard that. But I love that, sleep while they're sleeping.
When you can. I am very privileged in my career. It's very flexible. I really can do that. And I have a wonderful nanny who helps me at home when the kids are here and I'm working. So it's definitely not something that I try to say to all moms, you have to do it. And, this kind of self-care that sometimes is impossible for all of us. So I'm aware that the flexibility of being a writer and being at home with my kids when I want to be and choose to be, but also having additional support when I am getting work done, is really, it's not something that everybody has. So when it's possible, it's lovely, but I also am not judging any mom who says, I'm going to get a million things done because I need to. I've had those days as well.
Right. And I appreciate that perspective. And you're so great with that. One thing that I loved about your book is that you were like, I'm writing this on 3 women who are the mothers of sons. But I love that you acknowledge there's also been some great mothers of women who have been civil rights leaders and huge movers. And I love that although you choose what you do, you also acknowledge duality, you acknowledge the other side. And I really appreciate, even with this simple thing, I think it's so important to acknowledge that there's always
two sides of the coin or multiple perspectives or multiple ways of being. And I feel like you really hone in. And I think it's such a beautiful gift. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. That means the world. Yeah. And it happens quite often that people think I wrote the book because my firstborn was a boy, but I was actually not even pregnant when I started this project and started this research. So I wasn't at all trying to kind of celebrate the mothers of sons more than the mothers of any other children, but instead was trying to really be strategic and play on the patriarchy. I knew more people would pick up the book if the names MLK Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin were involved. But that also meant that even more people would walk away knowing 3 Black women's stories, no matter what it was that brought them to the book, if it was more interest in the sons, or if it was that they did truly want to know about the women from the beginning. Either way, they would walk away knowing these 3 mothers. So it was really just a strategic thing more than anything.
Well, thank you, because it definitely worked. And a lot of people have picked up the book. So let's go into why you wrote the book in the first place. So what inspired you in the first place? Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, it's always so hard for me to answer this simply because there are so many factors that influence us. Anytime we have an accomplishment or anything in our lives, you can go back and think of the multiple connections that lead to this moment. So for me, my mom was incredibly inspiring for me in my life. She was a lawyer. She advocated for women's rights in the US as well as abroad. So much of my life, I had the privilege, my siblings and I had the privilege of traveling around the world with her job. And she would tell us to pay attention to the way women and mothers were being treated in each of these different societies. And she believed that everything connected back to that. And the success of a nation depended on how it was treating its mothers very specifically. And the women who were being given this task, not only biological mothers, but those who were doing mothering work of leading other people in community. And so when I started my PhD, was keeping this in mind, some kind of project around motherhood and how the role was being overlooked and unappreciated. But then I was also incredibly inspired by Hidden Figures. So Margot Lee Shetterly's work that went on to become this incredible film. And the fact that it wasn't a mistake that we didn't know these women's names sooner, that it was very intentional to keep it out of the public knowledge that Black women were the minds behind NASA and they were the ones making the calculations. That was no mistake. It was very intentional to sweep their stories under the rug. And I thought, I'm going to be somebody who finds other hidden figures. I'm going to be somebody who contributes to what Margot Lee Shetterly is doing, what some other authors are doing. And I'm going to use my time in my PhD to produce a book that celebrates hidden figures and also celebrates mothers. And then the next stage of this, obviously that left a huge landscape open, unfortunately, of so many stories that I could have chosen from, because it happens all the time that Black women's stories are erased, that Black mothers' contributions are taken for granted. But I narrowed it down to the civil rights movement because we come back to it all the time in our policy discussions. We're going to continue to say, how is our nation living up to the vision that our civil rights heroes had in mind? We're going to be making these comparisons, but we speak about it from such a male dominant perspective. And so I said, I'm going to change that. Instead of talking about the women behind the men, which that saying always irks me. I really dislike it. I wanted to talk about the women before the men even existed. So that's why I chose these 3. And as I learned more about them, I realized that they all 3 were born within 6 years of each other. Their famous sons were born within 5 years of each other. So I could bring these 3 incredibly different stories that were beautifully rich in diversity and complexity without reducing them. Instead, I brought them together through time, and I could still speak about the many different ways that we are Black women and Black mothers, and not make this mistake where if we are represented, we're represented as a monolith. Without any complication. And it's really dehumanizing. And so I wanted to make sure that in the celebration of Black womanhood, I didn't do that, but instead said, look at how different the 3 of them were. And here are some things that brought them together. But primarily it's time.
And that's another thing I love. Like, just, it was so fascinating that they had that bond through time. And I found that very fascinating as well. And what do you feel like we have to learn? Like, what are the biggest lessons that you learned from doing this research and writing this book?
There are several, and so I'll just pick a few. One is that it's very clear this intentional erasure of women's stories, and very specifically Black women's stories, that because it doesn't fit this kind of hegemonic notion of this white male who is the leader, this white cisgender male as the hero of every story. If it doesn't fit that, we're just going to say it never happened or it didn't exist. We're going to keep it out of our public knowledge and our shared knowledge. So it's something we need to fight constantly. This is what I've learned in studying these three women, that it is so clear that their lives, their passions, their talents, long before they have children, translates into what their sons are able to do for the world. And we need to question why we didn't know these things sooner. So for instance, just a teaser for those who haven't read the book, Alberta King, long before MLK Jr. is her son, she is participating in marches and in boycotts, and she's using her privilege of access to education to advance freedom causes forward for other people. She believes that religious leaders should always stand against oppression and against discrimination. So the only difference really with MLK Jr. is that he starts to call it nonviolence and starts to see connections between what he learns at home from his mom and what global leaders are talking about. When we go to Louise Little, who's Malcolm X's mother, she's this radical activist from a very young age. She believes in Black independence, Black pride, Black self-sufficiency. As a teenager, she joins the Marcus Garvey movement, and she's writing for the Negro World newspaper. This is how she meets her husband. They're both organizers at a Marcus Garvey meeting. And we need to know that. That's really critical information. And then thirdly, with Burtis, she is a writer, and she believes that you can help people through pain, through hatred, by confronting it, but also to find the light. And you can do that with the use of words and your power over language. So in history, we've really only celebrated or even thought about the fathers of these great men. And we haven't thought about, especially in James Baldwin's case, his mother, who loved him so deeply, who stood up to this very abusive father figure and said, my son will write. This is his journey. This is his path. This is his calling. So this erasure is very strategic. And that's the biggest thing that I walked away knowing. And then secondly, and I won't make this as long of an answer, but so many mothers are feeling this erasure, this lack of appreciation across many different backgrounds and many different experiences. My own experience of talking about this book for a year and being on this virtual book tour allowed me to talk to so many more audiences than I probably would have had it all been in person. So I'm actually thankful for that little bit of a silver lining. But I talked to so many mothers who said, I have been erased. People aren't seeing me. And then I see the numbers where mothers are burned out in the United States. We have high levels of postpartum depression, in addition to what I already knew around the maternal health crisis and how that's exacerbated for Black women and the Black maternal health crisis. It's critical that people understand what mothers are feeling, and not only because they're imagining it or feeling it, but because systems are not in place to support this role of motherhood. So to see this through the pandemic, even so many mothers walking away from their jobs because they had no other choice. While I'm studying it and writing this book, I'm thinking, oh, this is interesting. I thought I was really focusing in on Black motherhood, which is really crucial. But also so many are feeling this sense of we don't respect the title of motherhood, the role of motherhood, the contributions of mothers. So it kind of expanded my interest even more, and I think the impact even more.
Absolutely. And And I feel like we can totally resonate with that, especially within the last 2 years, as people are finally understanding white supremacy more.
Right.
What role do you feel like white supremacy has to play in that erasure of Black women? Because I definitely feel like you mentioned it many times in your book, and I feel like that's the way we're set up. And, what role do you feel like that plays, which I know you feel like it plays a role? And then how do we shift that?
Yeah, it's a huge role. It's really this intersection of racism and patriarchy, white supremacy and sexism, and how women of color and especially Black women find ourselves with all of these compounding disadvantages because of this. And so when I was looking at Black motherhood, I'm thinking, of course, about what's developing in our nation and how for so many, the murder of George Floyd was the very first time they realized, oh, something's wrong, something's happening. And I thought this is really, first of all, heartbreaking that it's taken so many tragedies and centuries of people saying this is an issue, please open your eyes, for people to finally say, oh, okay, we understand there is a problem. But I also did see this as an opportunity to make sure that anybody who read my book realized that this isn't just a walk through history. It isn't just let's understand and learn about these three women. It's to see how we arrive where we are as a nation today through the eyes of Alberta, Bertus, and Louise. And so, of course, when I started writing the book, George Floyd was still alive. It was towards the end of me editing this book that we all heard the news and this tragic passing. And I said, I need to take those final words that he says before he's murdered and put them at the very beginning of my book so that people carry him and his mother, because he's calling out for his mother in those final words, through each chapter as we're walking through American history. So yeah, one can't really almost exist without the other. The patriarchy is so intertwined with the racism, and I need more people to be aware of that, which is something actually for my future writing projects is where I'm kind of trying to delve into. We've started to have a lot more books that have to do with tracing racist thinking in the US, and we are indebted to these authors for mapping this out for us so that we're not wasting time with the historical amnesia, cast and stamped from the beginning and white rage and just powerful books. If anyone hasn't read those yet, they need to. But we're missing a little bit of the puzzle when we're not thinking about how that intertwines with patriarchy and sexism. And so that's kind of my next project actually, is I'm going to be mapping alongside these books that have done such incredible work, how it's been written into our laws to oppress women and Black women, and the kind of layers of that intersectionality and disadvantage.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will be reading that book, and I will be reading White Rage. I actually haven't read that one.
Oh, it's so amazing.
I'm excited to put that on my list. But I feel like, you did a really great job of what you just said of documenting history, because I literally felt like I was watching a movie. Mm-hmm. You're very, very vigilant. It was very, and I'm an empath. So I guess I might feel a little bit extra. And I listen to Audible. So I was actually, following along, and I felt so much, and I've done a lot of trauma work, and a lot of therapy around trauma, like intergenerational trauma and things like that. Yeah. And how do we, listen, read, learn, and then really show up? Because as you know, it is exhausting. And I don't know if you felt the extreme exhaustion, especially during the last 2 years with trying to explain, but what advice would you give someone when you're feeling the pain, you're feeling the hurt, you're feeling that deep sadness, and you still want to go out and you want to make a difference, and you have to translate this message for those who are willing to hear it?
Yeah, it is exhausting. It is so difficult. And I'm definitely not someone who believes that Black people have to educate everyone around us on our pain and these histories of violence. But I do think there are some of us that are willing to do that. And I think that we all kind of play a unique role on the team. So I often say, if we're feeling tired, to not focus on all the many things that need to change, because there are several. And these systems, especially in a nation that was built on the idea that we were not human, we're going to see so many remnants of that to this day. But to take each of us something that we can do, something that we're maybe uniquely gifted to do, and translate that into the action so that we at least feel like we're holding our part of it, but that it's just exactly that. It's just our part of something so much larger. And even in this book, celebrating ancestors, celebrating those who came before us, a movement that they've started. It didn't start with us. It didn't start with MLK or James Baldwin or Malcolm X. We were all just doing our part and hoping that we keep pushing the needle forward. So for me, I've always felt, because of my experience traveling around the world, that I can connect with people across so many different lines, because I've had to. I was the new kid over and over again in different countries abroad. Sometimes I didn't even speak the language and then would learn it within 2 months, really to survive. But that's allowed me to connect with anybody and to see something in some way where I can say, I'm a human being, you're a human being. There's something we have in common, or let's really celebrate our incredible differences. That's the strength of our humanity. And to take that and say, I also have always loved school. I am a nerd. I love research. I love reading. I love writing. And so I always knew I was going to do a PhD, whatever the highest thing was that I could keep studying and researching, but not because I wanted to stay in the ivory tower, as they say, but instead to take that and make it accessible and make it a space where people can come together and be in conversation around things that may seem very complicated and at times can be uncomfortable, but that they shouldn't be filled with such academic jargon if they are impacting our daily lives. That if we are some people who have understanding of the history of this or the theory behind it, that we should make it easily understood and at least create spaces and books and material that many can approach. And that's what I think my unique talent is, from my background of growing up, as well as my passion for writing and research, is to take things and make it a tool that'll hopefully help more people. So for all of us, we just got to find those things. So on the days where I do feel very tired, for instance, like I'm aware of climate change. I don't think I'm personally doing all that much. I mean, maybe on my own, I'm recycling, et cetera, but I'm not an advocate for climate change. But I think somebody else is taking on that charge. So we're all just doing our part, and it can make it feel less heavy, hopefully.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I agree. I feel like if we all just do our part and not feel like we have to do all the part, it can help with exhaustion. And also, if we really prioritize self-care. And so I would love for you to share like kind of how you get loved up, what things you do. We know you nap, but what other things that you do to kind of feel yourself up when you feel like overwhelmed, exhausted. As a mom, you got a million things to do. So what are the things that you love to do to get loved up?
Yeah, I'd say every day, like at the end of the day, I watch an episode of TV because it helps me to unwind and just turn my brain off for a second. And it's really relaxing, especially when my husband and I can both say, all right, the kids are in bed. We're just going to cuddle up and watch something, whether it's trash TV or not, it doesn't matter. But just turn our minds off and kind of put my phone down even is really important to me. I also love to do yoga. I go at least two times a week to a class outside of my house. I used to be able to do a lot more, but with the kids, of course, it's not quite as easy for me to get out. But as much as possible, just having that space where, again, my phone is somewhere else. And no matter what, it's kind of a reminder, especially when I'm outside of my home, that things will keep going if for that hour no one can get a hold of me. Like, it'll be okay. Right. My kids will be okay. the world will be okay. I'm also really big on not responding to things immediately. Like I'm not the kind of person that when I get a text message, I need to reply right away. I can save it. I treat texts like emails. Like I'll get to that when I get to that. And I really try to not allow other people's urgency to affect me, because I'm well aware that the world can go on and they will be okay. That's kind of my general outlook on life, and just appreciating the little moments. I think for me, I prioritize family. I prioritize my children and my happiness and my joy, my husband. So if I'm feeling at all like I'm not connecting enough with them on a certain day, I'm big on, like you said, I'm an empath as well. If I just feel sort of like, didn't have enough time with them, then the next day I don't even do any work. And I just spend that time with my kids and playing with their toys or taking them to an activity or whatever it is. So I just listen to my heart as much as I can.
I love that. And I love that you call that out. Like you don't have to be perfect with it, but just pay attention to it. And when you see like, oh, this didn't happen, maybe I could shift something the next day. I think that's just such a practical and simple way to like kind of course correct or realize, okay, I feel a little bit imbalanced here, so let me balance it out over here. I think that's giving yourself so much grace, but also not guilting and shaming yourself for having a heavy work day.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm just also aware that it's so good for me personally. I think oftentimes, especially moms, we feel like, oh, it'll be really good for the kids if I spend that time. But I realize if I'm overworked, I'm terrible. I'm easily angered or annoyed. I can't focus. And so I realize it even for myself, if I'm having a hard time concentrating, if I'm feeling like everything is annoying me someday, that I just need to just take a step back. And it's actually something my mom always reminded me of. If I called her and I sounded overwhelmed, she'd say, what are some things you can just cancel on your schedule? Can you just go through and cancel some things? And it's a lot of relief. And I think really, especially just not paying attention to others' expectations of you. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, it's you. You have to just make sure you're okay. And just do your best to make sure you're okay.
I love that. 100%. I have 2 questions I ask myself every day at noon. How do you feel and what do you need? Mm-hmm. And those questions really make you zone in and think about how you're feeling. And then it's different every day. You need something else. So what would you say that your childhood and your upbringing, how did your childhood and your upbringing kind of shape the woman that you are today? When you speak of women, and I know that before we got on, you shared with me that you recently just experienced this transition of your mom. So can you talk a little bit about your upbringing, how much she meant to you and how that has really shaped who you are? Absolutely. Thank you for the question. My upbringing was so different in terms of being super nomadic and moving from place to place every several years. But I think it's different for every child who has that experience. But for me, it was something that I really loved. I loved having friends in one place. And then when my parents said we were moving, I was sort of like, yay, more friends. I'm going to move. But that wasn't always the case. For my brother, for instance, he had a deeper sense of like, I want to stay rooted. And I hate that you keep uprooting us. And as much as he had the same ease of making connections, he didn't want to have to do it again. There was more a sense of like loss every time we left somewhere. And I was just excited about the next adventure. So I think that says a lot about who I am. And I'm always kind of finding the positivity in wherever I am and wherever I move, and trying to see the best side in everyone. Mainly because it's not like I really had a choice. I think I was aware that my parents were in charge of where I was going to be in my life, and I didn't really have a choice. And if they said we were moving, we were moving. And so it just formed this sense of, let me make the best out of it, and let me see what it is I'm supposed to learn from this new place or this new person. And everything happens for a reason. Like, these are kind of sayings that I have all the time. My mom
was my best friend in so many ways, an inspiration for me with her work, how confidently she spoke about what she believed in, that even if so many other people didn't realize how important mothers were, that she would say, you know, you need to pay attention. This is where the truth lies. She was a lawyer, and her parents had told her that she shouldn't be. And everyone had said that she just needed to kind of get married. She was born in 1952. So this mentality that she shouldn't be able to support herself and should instead have children, get married, and that be it. That she not have any aspirations beyond that. And so when she said she wanted to be a lawyer because her dad was a judge, and she was made fun of for that, instead of allowing that to stop her, she went and she did become a lawyer, and she paid for herself to go to school. She was working as a realtor to make money so that she could pay for herself, her daughter, her firstborn, my sister, and just really paving her own path is incredible to me. And I also had moments where my mom was traveling abroad, and so we were with our dad, and she was still doing her work as a consultant, sometimes in crisis zones. She was in Iraq, Afghanistan, Juba, all of these places that were really going through some serious transitions. And that bravery, as well as this saying, yes, I have my children, and I also can still do the work that I'm really passionate about, maybe isn't something that every mother would want or say is the best route, but it did teach me that I didn't necessarily have to choose. I could do both, or as much as I wanted to. But she also was very supportive of stay-at-home mothers and saying how critical they were to our societies. She was just really balanced in that way. And yes, she passed recently. It's something that I am processing still, and going through the waves of grief. But I'm thankful that a year before she passed, I've been on this book tour where I'm shouting at my mom constantly, and that she was alive to hear it. And I didn't realize it was such a gift that was being given, to feel that when she passed, she knew exactly how much I loved her, how much I looked up to her, how much of a role she played in who I am. So I'm grateful for that.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And what do you feel like, how can we support Black mothers more? I feel like you kind of just led into it there. So I kind of want you to just really tell us how, because I feel like you've done it with your book. But I want to hear from you, like, how do you feel like we can be better, even as a society?
Yeah. I would say, and the final chapter of my book is entirely about what do we need to shift now? You know, now that we've walked through these lives with Alberta, with Burtis and Louise, what is it that today as a nation we're still not getting right when it comes to the treatment of Black mothers? And so I almost feel like going a little bit, like one example for each woman. I say now that if it was something that could have helped them, and we still don't have it now, that's the place to start. So for instance, with Alberta, so she was on her path to becoming an educator. This is MLK Jr.'s mom. I know it's hard to keep track of all three of them sometimes. She had a bachelor's degree as well as a teaching certificate. But at the time when she met her husband, the law stated that it was illegal for married women to still be teachers. There were several other careers, but specific to her, she could no longer teach by law if she decided to start a family. And while that law doesn't exist anymore, there are still these sentiments that it's up to this woman to make it work, rather than have things available to her like affordable quality childcare or universal parental leave. That would be essential and could help so many mothers in our country. And these are also the reasons why mothers had to walk away from their jobs during the pandemic. And this was mostly mothers of color. It's this kind of example that with Alberta's life and what she was kind of saying she needed and could have really benefited from, the fact that we still don't have that established as a nation. And I'm not saying that this was ancient history. I think obviously Alberta, Burtis, and Louise lived in very recent history. But we should have that now. So that's one thing for her. With Louise Little, she at one point in her life was put in a mental institution against her will for around 25 years because a white male physician evaluated her and said that she was, quote, imagining being discriminated against. And these biases in our healthcare systems that tell Black women, you're imagining this is just something you're feeling, happen over and over and over again. The Black maternal health crisis, so much of it is a result of bias against Black women that doesn't hear us when we say this is happening to me. And someone who's a professional, quote unquote, would say, that's not really happening. I know what's happening to your body better than you do. This other thing is happening instead, where we see this even with Serena and Beyonce telling stories of not being heard, and possibly almost losing their lives. So any of these biases that exist in healthcare systems that are not validating the real opinions of Black women, as well as their own understanding of their bodies, we need to fix. And we need to be able to understand the histories that those come from in order to fix that. Because I think most medical practitioners don't think they have any bias, but we're clearly seeing that they do. And then thirdly, with Bertis Baldwin, she lived an incredibly beautiful life and a very long one. She didn't pass away until 1999, but for a lot of her life, she was also the victim of an abusive husband. And because she didn't have anyone else to call, other than maybe a police officer, which we all know for Black community members, even when we're calling for help, things can go south very quickly. She endured that pain on her own for years and years. And there should have been something else in place for her to call. We as a nation have seen over and over again that policing should not be, let's say, responsible for social work, for instance. There should be more funding put towards social workers and de-escalation and thinking about other resources that people could call when they really do need the help, especially victims of domestic violence. And this is very large in Black communities. We need to pay attention to this number. We should all be enraged by it and think of the many different ways that we could support mothers and women who are being trapped in these situations because they have nowhere else to go. So those are three, but there are several, I think, policies that can come out of studying their lives.
Yes. And I appreciate you because the biggest one that I'm getting from you is just acknowledging it, saying this is wrong, this is happening, and let's do something about it. And then us collectively getting together and doing, like you even said earlier, what we can, just our part in whatever that is. And I just think that is so beautiful, so profound. I hope every single person listening right now goes out and, gets a copy of your book and the other two books that you mentioned, White Rage and Caste. And I really love how you also now are with your own family, kind of really creating a template for, raising a Black family. So can you talk a little bit about your fears and also how you navigate raising a family in the climate we're in now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a sociologist. That's what my PhD is in. So I believe that the family is the first society that children are exposed to. And I think if more of us thought of it that way, the way we raise our families, that we'd make some different decisions sometimes. We want to say to our children what we envision the world should be outside of our home. Those are the things that we should be modeling within our home. So, if you're, for instance, in a relationship where there is a male figure and a female figure, and you believe that these identities should be treated the same no matter what, and have equality and have equity in the world, then within your household, you need to try to model that as much as possible, and the way you speak to each other in the division of roles, for instance, and in speaking about even what our children have access to. We also have this this current situation where our children are also, one female, one male, and the way we treat them is going to matter for their beliefs in this world and what they think that they're capable of doing. Some of my fears really started when I first found out I was expecting my son. And I talk about this in the book. I didn't know he was a boy. Regardless of sex, I knew that I was having a Black child, and what that meant for me as a woman to be going into these hospitals that have these biases that I was speaking about, that I was well aware of because this is what I'd studied. But that my degrees were not going to help me or were not going to save me. And that my husband's and my accomplishments were not necessarily going to protect our children as they walked outside of our homes. Those fears are still very real for me when I think about them being treated in ways that they deserve more from. They deserve to be treated with dignity and with respect. And not everyone is going to see them that way. And I've already had instances, they're so little. I have a 2-year-old and a 6-month-old, but I've already experienced these kinds of attacks against them, whether it's in different comments that people make or the way they see them, because we're also a very tall family, how they're already, I would say, kind of adultifying my children. I'm fearful of that all the time. But something that I've learned, again, through studying these 3 women, as well as from my mom, who was a white woman and was an incredible ally, and taught me also about the need to change this world to be more worthy of me, her Black child, was that I needed to keep a hold on my joy and my love and not allow fear to be the only thing that I was feeling, to use that fear as a driving force, to face it, not to hide it and say, don't be afraid, but to say, yes, this world can be very scary. But my joy and my agency is something that I need to hold on to, because that's how I continue to fight against these forces, those moments of relaxation, of not constantly feeling like I need to work, but feeling like love, relaxation, happiness are the greatest tools in this fight. So whenever I do feel those fears, I remind myself of the work that I'm doing. I'm doing my part as a team member of this larger team. And I'm also doing my part when I remind myself of the joy and the love, and really, to put a bow on our whole conversation, the importance of relaxing as well.
Yeah, I love that 100%. And I think that is the takeaway, even from the last couple of years, is just like, take this time to relax, take this time, do the work, do your part, but also realize it is a sacred time to rest and recover in the darkness. I truly believe it's time for us to rest and recover and get ready to shine. And then when we rest and recover, just like, night and day, then we can shine even brighter. We can shine even better if we take that time to rest and recover. So thank you so much. You definitely wrapped it in a bow, and I'm definitely so grateful that you've taken the time to speak with us. And at the end of the show, I like to ask like a couple of your favorite things. You've also already given us some of your favorite books. So do you have any favorite songs that you love to listen to like lift your mood?
Ooh, this is a good one. I never know the actual names of songs, so I'm just going to like reference them. We'll see.
You're going to sing to us? Okay.
No, I'm not going to sing. I do love singing. I do, but I'm not going to do it today. But Girl on Fire, Alicia Keys, is one of my favorites, especially the Nicki Minaj version. Like, that just gives you an extra bit of that energy that you need. Honestly, anything by Beyonce. I am such a huge Beyonce fan. Absolutely obsessed with her. I love her. Who else? I love Alicia Keys, love Beyonce. And then of course, like, again, I don't know the actual name of the song, but Rise. What is her name? I'm like forgetting right now. My brain. Do you know who I'm talking about?
You mean I'll Rise Up? Or
yeah, I'll Rise Up.
Yeah, Adriana Day.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that song is just like, it just puts fire in my soul. And it's one of my favorite songs too. And also love Alicia Keys and Beyonce all day long. All fire. Well, thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm so excited for people to know you and witness your work and really dive in, because I feel like you did do a very great job of just bringing it in a very digestible way, very vivid, I feel like I want to make a movie out of it, because I feel like it'll be a really great movie. I don't know if you've thought of that, but
hopefully something's coming.
No, because it's written very cinematically, and I full on could see, just all of history like playing itself through these women. So if you're listening, go out. I definitely recommend getting the physical copy, which I don't even have yet, but to the Audible, because it's or the audio, because it's so much fun. And thank you so much for coming on. Do you have any last thoughts? I like to ask this one question, and I want to ask you this one for sure.
Okay.
If the world, you could wake up and it was Anna's world, and you were able to create, as the divine creator, a world that you would want your children to grow up in, what would it look like?
Certainly more Black women would be the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, leadership is still necessary. You're always going to have a moment where someone is in authority or is, giving rules or kind of leading the path and telling people where to go. And I think if more Black women were at the helm, it would just be such a beautiful world to live in. So I'm always thinking about how we can even elect more Black women. I think these things are possible, even if it's, I am not the God of the world, but I think we have some power right now to make those things more of a reality. And seeing the vision that Black mothers and Black women have for this world play out in law and in policy would be magical.
Ashe, I agree. That would be a beautiful thing. And I truly believe, because we've been through so much, and we've been resilient through so much. We have so much compassion. We would seriously take care of everyone. Even though we've been so harmed, it's because we have experienced the lowest of the low. We have this level of compassion, I think is impossible if you have not felt how it feels to be a Black woman, a minority, an Indigenous woman who has in your DNA still have the residual energetics of being, put down and drugged through the mud for so many. Sorry. I didn't mean, I got excited. It's exciting.
I wanted to build on what you were saying. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that, this kind of ability to visualize beyond what's currently available to us, this notion that we were treated as less than human, but we knew what we were worthy of, and we had to be able to see beyond that. And so we're visionary, and we're always pushing the world closer to say, look how we see things, how we all should be treated and can be treated. And I think that's what also contributes to this ability to say, here's a better way of doing things.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And I feel like I was talking to a friend just earlier today, and they were like, well, I feel like, I forgot what the question was, but it came around to, it's fascinating. It would be fascinating to see actually how we would get everyone in the world to see that like anti-racism and feminism and things like this is actually going to be better for the world. I would love to hear, your thoughts on how this is possible.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I often joke about this. So I don't know how it's going to be taken. I've never said it really publicly, but I feel like sometimes if we had, like a dictator who was like good and it was like, no, we are all going to have healthcare. It's going to be okay. Or like, we're taking away everyone's guns. You're going to be okay kind of thing, where it was just kind of like a hands down, we're just doing it all. And then people could say, oh, okay, I thought it was going to be really bad, but that really was fine. Kind of thing.
That part. I mean, it seems so simple, right? It seems so simple, like no guns. And so you can't hunt, but you'll be okay.
You're gonna be okay.
A lot less people will be dead.
Yeah, our police officers will be safer even, you know, like it's like on all ends. It doesn't have to be the way we currently have it. And I think people and I think that's also part of the fact that I moved so many times. I saw so many different ways of living and loving and believing and even leadership and these different governments. And it's like, it doesn't have to be the way it is right now, but we as Americans are very like, but this is how we do things. You know, we have our guns, and you're like, why are you okay with people just like walking around, but just to keep the right that we've had as Americans? Like, it just doesn't, to me, ever make sense. But that's because I've lived in so many different places that change is always possible in my brain because I've seen it. It feels very tangible, and it's just sort of like, how do we convince more people that they're going to be okay if things change?
That's really fascinating, because what just came up for me, especially from a yoga sense, is like I go to the root chakra when I think about guns and the idea that people don't feel safe. You know, and it's like, okay, why don't you feel safe? Is it because of what you've done in the past that you don't feel safe? Or is it because of what you're scared of that has been done in this past? You know, and it all is still based on fear. But if we base it on love and actually, yes, these terrible things have been done by by humanity at large. Yeah. But if we want to stop it, let's just make these changes, like you said, you know, and in acknowledging the pain in the heart. But like, okay, let's look at the big picture. What can we do to stop war? What can we do to end gun violence? What can we do to stop racism? You know, all these things, if we just really sit down and just like, okay, let's all agree and do the thing, versus if one person or groups of people are still in such a fear mentality of, I have to be safe. I feel like that is the hardest part, is getting people out of the root chakra of not feeling safe and into this humanity of, we will all be safer if we all know, if we join together, we are safe if we're not fighting against each other, which is, that would be great.
Oh, so beautiful. Yeah.
I want to live in your world.
Yours, same. We'll do it together. I feel like difference for so many people does feel very scary. Change feels very scary. But if you can kind of let go of that need to keep things, I don't know, just the way that they currently are, I feel like it's really liberating. But in the US, it's such an interesting kind of dichotomy, because it's sort of like, we don't want to confront the way things are. Instead, there's so many people that are just trying to take control of the narrative and present something that isn't reality. You know, even this whole controversy around critical race theory and learning our true histories is something that's up for debate. Why? Why are people fearful of the truth even?
Right. Yeah, I mean, because it's going to reveal a lot of things for people to feel shameful about. And I feel like shame puts you back in fear state, and like, oh, okay, now once it's revealed that I've done all these terrible things, or my ancestors have done all the terrible things, then I'm a terrible person. And, you know, and then we have to start healing again. But the thing is, unless it's done, it's real, it's in reality, it's affecting us as a human race. Yeah. So unless we unpack it as a human race, then we're not going to be able to heal it. And it affects all of us. So it's like, you can't just like cover it up. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist. First, you have to acknowledge it. And then everyone's going to feel pain. It can't just be one person. It can't be just the oppressed feeling pain. Once that truth comes to life, the oppressor is the lineage of oppression. And you should feel pain, and it should hurt. And those feelings are real and they are valid, and you got to feel them. And a lot of people experience that. And I think the more that we're willing to experience, you know, shame and guilt and pain and still move forward in a place of love, the more we can truly move towards collective healing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of it as this wound that if we just keep putting a bandage on it, nothing is getting better. And for the people who inflict trauma or who are not willing to acknowledge trauma, but know that it's there, like even if it's at the back of their minds, they're trying to like push it away from themselves, it's also doing damage to them. So on all ends in our country, if we're not acknowledging those who have experienced the pain, and those who maybe even, family members inflicted that pain, even if it wasn't them personally, they're hurting themselves by not saying, let's give ourselves a shot at healing this wound together. That's really what we want. We want to heal the wound so that we can actually move forward.
Yeah. I love that. We want to heal the wound together. Thank you so much, Anna. This has been such a beautiful, beautiful time. And just let people know where they can find you, where they can get your book and enjoy more of your offerings.
Yeah, absolutely. You can just go to AnnaMalaikaTubbs.com. Everything's there. You can follow me on my socials from there, or read the latest articles, or sign up for the newsletter, all of the above, and stay up to date on future projects because a lot is coming.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait. I'm so excited. Thank you all for tuning in for another episode of the Get Loved Up podcast. Let us know your favorite takeaways. We went on a total tangent at the end, and I absolutely loved it. So let us know your greatest takeaways. Tag me, tag Anna, and just let us know what really resonated the most with you. And until next time, love yourself, love others, and love the world one day at a time, one breath at a time. Peace and love.
I just want to take a moment to say thank you for being part of the Get Loved Up community. I like to share topics and people making a positive impact in the world, and your feedback means the world to me. If you haven't already left a review, please leave a 5-star review and let me know what you want to hear more of on the show. I'm here for you, and together we're making the world a better place, one day at a time, one show at a time. Thank you for listening.